We will say it like it really is.
With dignity and respect.
Committed to free speech and common sense.
Upbeat and entertaining.
Straight talking and direct.
We may agitate each other and you.
Heartfelt and passionate.
Thought-provoking, provocative and controversial.
Fearless and truthful.
Hello and welcome to this festive edition of The Pledge. Now, there are plenty of signs that Britain's in decline. Rising inflation, increasing poverty, falling living standards, the government in chaos. Yet all of these pale in comparison to the final surefire sign that things are really bad. Nick Ferrari's been named Journalist of the Year at the British Journalism Awards. We truly are all doomed.
Well done.
Coming up, Rachel says it's about time we learn to cope with a bit of bad weather. June says we need to tackle loneliness, especially at Christmas. Nick votes for his Person of the Year, and Greg predicts the future. But first, it's me. 'Tis the season to be jolly, or at least it would be if the killjoys of the politically correct brigade would wind in their self-righteous necks. But no, in the wake of the sexual harassment allegations, the pasty Scrooges have decided to kill the Christmas party. Yep, the very unjoyful tidings from the TUC are that staff who misbehave at their Christmas bash could face the sack or jail. What's the point of a Christmas do if you can't whip off your top to? Or snog under the mistletoe, or photocopy your bum cheeks, or tell the boss he's a twit. But not having a Christmas party, or having one that feels like it's been policed by the Stasi, sends out a negative message that makes staff feel unappreciated and misses the point that they can help people bond and relax away from the office. It also assumes that all men, if they've had a glass or three of eggnog, can't be trusted not to grope or rape women, which is insulting and, frankly, not in the spirit of Christmas.
Well, first, Carol...
Before we go...
hats off to you for doing that in one take. Congratulations on that. Now, I think it was, for me, best summarised, and I'll come back to a very good point you made, with the Police Service of Northern Ireland tweeting a warning: if you bump into that special someone under the mistletoe tonight, remember that without consent it is rape. Hashtag season's greetings. Now, that is wrong on more levels than I can possibly imagine, not least to equate a kiss under the mistletoe akin to rape. Any victim of rape, just absurd. But you are right. And I know, Rachel, you're tackling this, so I won't steal any of your thunder whatsoever. But what this ultimately be was a snowflake generations that we are building. And quite candidly, before I throw it open to the rest of them, if I hadn't had a snog or a bit of fun at a Christmas party, I wouldn't have had most of the sexual activity of my life. And I wouldn't have met the person I'm with now, because I actually met her at a Christmas party, and that is true.
Really?
That is absolutely true. That's where I first spoke with her.
And did you snog her at the party?
No, but I gave her my phone number.
Oh.
And it wasn't a landline.
But the thing is, the Christmas party comes with guidelines now. You're not supposed to talk about your career. You're not supposed to talk about your salary. You're not. You're not supposed to talk about where you go. And and you have to comply with the Equality Act of 2010. Really? I mean, the TUC. Just let me do you a quote from the TUC here. It says, "Many of us look forward to the traditional work Christmas party as a chance to wind down and celebrate with colleagues. But workers and bosses should remember that they are still in a work setting. Nobody wants to do something that might get them sacked just before Christmas. Employers must be clear that they have a zero-tolerance attitude to sexual harassment."
What a drab,
Bar
colourless
humbug
world.
to you,
Drab,
see.
colourless world.
Absolutely.
No, it has changed, though, isn't it? I remember, as a young lad in television, the Christmas...
Christ, that's going back in time.
It is.
This
was Dickensian.
It's like a Christmas carol.
But I always remember there was one Christmas party, a couple ended up bonking on the... in one of...
lowered the tone so soon.
Well, I'm telling you, that's what happened. In one of the offices, and somebody walked in...
And they didn't get fired, did they?
No, the woman looked up and picked up the waste bin and put it over the bloke's head.
Hang on. That's what my girlfriend does. That's the only way I've ever met. What's so strange there? I don't have sex any other way.
But, I mean, things used to be much wilder, I think, than they are now.
Yeah, but it's like, you know, how are they going to police this? Are they going to have HR people standing with a notebook going, oh, yes, touched, bum touch, whatever?
No, but if you were running a company, to be fair, to be honest, if you were running a company today, given what's gone on, I think you would say to your managers, just behave.
But you know what it is? There's a thing called vicarious liability, which means that if an assault happens on, even if it's not on the work premises, if it's at a work do, employers are liable, which means they're not bothered about women's safety, they're bothered about losing money.
But what happens if you have a works do and one of your lads or girls gets a bit drunk and then has a road accident or falls down a flight of stairs? Is that covered by vicarious liability?
It'd be interesting to find that out. I don't know, but
it's strangely silent.
No, I completely agree with you, Carol. Yeah, I think the world is going mad in the sense that, of course, we have to deal with sexual harassment. Of course we do. And, of course, we have to deal with serious sexual assault. But we're beginning to conflate just the most ridiculous things at the moment. And I just think, actually, it's going to be interesting to see what Christmas parties are like this year. They're not going to be any fun because everybody's going to be petrified.
Should we tell the viewers that after we recorded this show, we're going to our Christmas party? I was really disappointed.
You can put that hat back on.
I'm never going to take
that wearing that hat.
But I thought, like we had the glitter ball one year, I thought we were going to have the mistletoe hanging above the pledge table. And just to check that we all behaving
Let's just put it between Greg and Carol. I mean,
maybe we can kiss and make up at the party.
That could be rape.
Some things you can do, some you can't. Yes, that might be accused of harassment.
That's how you could get rid of Greg,
Greg, can I say something? I think the Christmas spirit is working because, look at this, there's peace between you two, so something's working.
Well, that's only because we haven't said anything.
Yeah, exactly. We've only been on air about 5 minutes. So give it time. You're right. I just do think you're right. And, you know, as you said before, for the Northern Irish Police to equate a fumble under the mistletoe with a rope demeans rape.
Yeah.
Can I give you some facts and figures? I actually ended up writing my column about this last week.
You did.
And there's one company in America called Vox Media who's issuing employees with 2 tickets. Each one can be redeemed for 1 alcoholic beverage.
Come on.
I mean, talk about killjoys.
But you know, the one thing you said, Nicole, let me quote you, you said here, a party can't be turned into a safe space where people have to ask permission to talk to each other or touch each other.
Men and women have been drinking alcohol together since the dawn of time, to no ill effects and to sometimes great results.
Yes.
Look at Nick finding his new missus.
Yes.
And as I said it... Well, not yet.
Not till after Christmas.
I've seen that movie and I don't like it.
Have you not bought the ring for Christmas?
No, I haven't.
You're not getting down on one knee at Christmas.
Can I show you what one company's doing, a creative agency called Salad. They're based in Dorset, and what they've done is, instead of having a crazy Christmas party in the UK, instead they took all of their team for 2 nights away. Oh, wow. To Spain. Not bad going.
But do you know why that's good? Because vicarious liability probably doesn't apply there.
Of course. But then again, they're still in the EU, so maybe it does.
Oh, no, let's not go down. That's where we could start
now. But what I think that does, actually, is I don't think it changes anything, because it means everybody has hotel rooms. So, actually, I think you kind of encourage it even more.
Where did they go?
Spain.
What goes on in Spain?
Stays in Spain.
Just to take the counter view.
Yes.
They do that, and one bloke, you know, makes some approaches to someone. Later she's leaving or she's been fired or something. She'll claim sexual harassment. I mean, that's the problem. It has become quite serious, and that's why I think managements have to say to their managers, look, you can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Do you think the old days will ever return? By which I don't mean men feeling happy to cry. But just where you can... You really think it's gone forever?
I think employers will be too concerned, as will managers, I think.
But all girls around the table must remember those parties where you knew who to dodge, and those men who would run around the parties with their wet lips trying to
but conversely,
there
was always the one you'd fancied all year and you couldn't get close to, and the party was the perfect time to sidle up there after a couple of glasses of Prosecco. It was the thing to do. Amble over, see me approaching and me hat.
A couple of pints of snake bite in your case, actually, not so much Prosecco, wasn't it? We're absolutely honest about that.
Yeah, let's be honest, yes, that's true.
Mateus Rosé.
I love that, don't laugh at Mateus.
So have you all had your office parties? Have you had your office party at your radio station?
Yes, but I didn't go to it, I forgot about it.
Have you had your newspapers one yet?
I'm going to one. I did actually. I've had one, and I'm going to another tonight. You know, a bit of a tart, as I am.
No, there's no party without a Johnson.
It's not a party until I've arrived.
There you go.
Did it feel radically different?
No, it didn't. But it was quite a sedate affair.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it was sort of
that comes
6
with
to 9.
age, Rachel.
Yeah.
I am getting quite sedate.
Yes, it comes with age.
The pledge
Yes.
Christmas lunch.
I mean, it's not like being
Speak-
25, is it?
Speaking of being sedate and not wanting to have nasty falls, we've got to move on.
Okay.
Okay.
It's time to churno. Sorry, I'm making a real hash of this.
It's Christmas. Move on.
going.
Carry on anyway, because it's Christmas. And as the first flakes flutter from the heavens, you just know what's going to happen. The whole country's going to take a snow day, or make that a snow week, in fact. Flights will be grounded, schools closed, trains will be cancelled, Piers Morgan will tweet, we're a nation of snowflakes, as you just said. We have a few inches of the white stuff and everything stops working. In other countries, they cope fine with metres of snow, but not us. And days after the so-called snow bomb, thousands of schools were still closed, citing elf, haha, and safety first. Baby, yes, it's cold outside and there's some white mush on the ground. But this doesn't have to mean we close the country down. What's happened to our famous grit?
Yeah.
Yes.
Grits.
Here. Yeah.
Rachel, you're going to... If
What?
you did what you wanted to suggest, you're going to lose something that's very British.
What?
Well, the inability to cope with
yes.
with weather is a very British. It's a British phenomenon. I quite
No,
like
but it's
it.
quite a new one, because if you looked at the, social media, people were writing into the Daily Express and Daily Mail saying, we never had a snow day when I was growing up in the 30s or the 40s.
Or even in the
80s.
Teachers.
No, we didn't have...
I'll let you finish.
No, well, you're right. We didn't have snow days, but that was the days before health and safety had taken over the world, wasn't it? Really. I mean, the trouble today. The trouble today is you say, right, all come into the school and someone falls over in the playground and gets injured, and
No,
there's
but
all
that's
sorts
not
of
true.
things.
Because how come... It's extraordinary. There's a part of London where I know someone whose child goes to a private school, and she has been walking her children past a state school, which has been closed, or I shouldn't say, but one day this week, and the private schools stay open. There's a real difference. It's interesting. If you drill down, whatever the reasons it is, the private schools, whether they just realise that they're taking tons of money off the parents, so they're going to open the gates, and in too many instances, schools open, and I did this on the radio show, because the teachers decide that it's too dangerous for them to even get to the school. So then the head teachers are faced with the prospect, I haven't got enough teachers to legally police or look after my children. Let's say the ratio is 1 to 25, I've made that up. Hang on, if all everybody comes in, I'm breaking the law. So there are so many other aspects, Greg.
Are we only talking about school? Because I mean, I went to Bristol and went to places this week driving, and actually I was amazed by how good the roads were.
How is the HGV job going now?
It's really good. Yes, I was
the one job he has.
I was delivering ads somewhere. I don't know what it was.
No, you got that wrong. He owns the company.
They should be ashamed of themselves. In Birmingham and elsewhere, shutting 2,500 schools.
Yes.
Graham White, who is the National Education Union, he said schools are for education, not for childminding, and that was in response to all the parents who were complaining. Well, if they are for education, stop worrying about ambulance chasing lawyers
I've
and
got an
compoter
idea.
and
What's
teach
your
kids.
idea?
Do you know what?
Well, I think it's really...
But when I was at school, the headmaster, if it was snowing the night before, he would go to the schoolyard, he would chuck a pail of hot water on the snow to make it ice, so we'd have an ice rink the next day, so we could all skate up and down the blooming ice rink. That's what it was like in the North East.
Well, that was the North East. I mean, you should introduce him to the health and safety officer for that.
Not interested.
Wasn't invented.
Nick did raise a good point, which is that schools, all the schools protested that they weren't childminders, and parents couldn't complain because they had no one to look after their kids. And, if the teachers aren't physically present, you can't have hundreds of children arriving at a school because who's going to do crowd control? So this is my idea. Why don't the emergency services, if they know it's going to be a school day, for goodness sake, we've got the Weather Channel, we know when we're going to have a snowball.
3 days before,
make sure the teachers are somehow conveyed in safety to the school, and therefore can be there to receive.
But Rachel, I suspect they didn't want to go.
I know you say
Christmas shopping days.
This is self-fulfilling, because this generation, if they become some teachers will say, "Oh, it's snowing. I remember I didn't use it." So this you will never, unless you do what I understand they do in France.
Which is what?
Hold that thought. I'd say after. You see what I'm keeping people around now, right? Hold that thought, June. I'll tell you what they do in France after.
Okay, so when I was a kid, I remember we moved back from Ghana to the UK in the early 80s, and so imagine I'd been in this hot country. And Christmas for me and January was hell because we still had to go to school. It was freezing, snow everywhere, and I would sit in the playground crying every day. But you know what? I was better for it.
Really?
It made me the tough woman that I am.
Stayed open.
Stayed open.
I'm surprised they let you wear shoes, actually.
And grass skirts, actually.
Right, I'm moving on from that. Wait.
Come on, what do they do
In France, and I think it's something like €10 a term, each parent takes insurance. So if their son and daughter is injured in a hockey game or rugby or whatever, they are or falls over in the school during snow or ice, they are covered by a separate insurance policy, so the schools can open, and if a child does fall down the stairs,
so be it.
The insurance
and do you know, in Austria, there's a law that says people have to go out and clear the snow outside your front
Same in America.
Yes, that's
Same
the law.
In
and also in Austria, if the jobless get sent out, they get paid €20 a day to clear the snow off
I like
the road.
that idea.
So do I. I mean, but
we haven't got any jobless.
But this is countries who've got a can-do attitude. We've got a can't-do attitude.
Interrupt, sir, quickly. No. So you were saying a minute ago, is it just schools? No, it's not. No. It's our sportsmen as well. So let's have a look. So let's see the Saracens. In North London, snow, closed, no one around. Look at that, completely empty, just one person.
Could you play rugby on a snowy pitch?
Well, clearly you can, because look at the NFL. Look at this.
Good lad.
This is what we're talking about.
See,
that's getting it done.
Yeah. Still touchdowns.
June, I've got something else to show you, though.
That's what we want to see.
Dead right.
Dead right.
It wasn't like that. That was in North London. But the thing was, it wasn't a blanket all over the whole country. And actually, Sophie Ridge, our lovely Sky presenter, during the snow bomb, tweeted this, which shows a tiny smear of snow on some pavement and a sort of complete lock, the whole country had closed down.
But, you know, this wasn't extreme weather in any way, shape or form. You know, we've got transport bosses, rail bosses, people on madly obscene salaries who can't handle a not very challenging situation. It's terrifying.
It is terrifying because there will just be more, as I say, subsequent...
You're right, self-fulfilling.
And I think someone... But how on earth... Was it you who said, how on earth do they operate in Canada or Norway?
Precisely.
You know what you do?
But they expect it, and therefore they invest a lot more. No, but we don't get enough of it. In Norway, you know you're going to get snow, and therefore you have all the equipment. But here, you don't. We go whole years without snow, don't we?
What happened
Not many.
Heathrow and British Airways invested millions and millions into snow clearing equipment, which they knew they were going to only use for 6 days a year or something, but they still cancelled hundreds of flights,
but I
didn't they?
understand that's again because staff didn't turn up. So there's this idea, now that's only reported, but the idea that if a number of staff don't turn up, then you've got anybody to get the bags off the planes, or you haven't got anybody to open the doors, or, you know, with the baseball, with the table tennis rackets, whatever, you bring someone...
But do you remember in 2010 where it was... Do you remember we ran out of salt as a nation? There was no salt to grit the roads, no grit. And they brought out this snow code to mean that it was called a snow code, to make sure we had salt in the future. But one of the clauses in the snow code was to tell people how to avoid lawsuits for clearing their own path. And so Austria, you have to do it. In this country, we give instructions on how to sue people if you clear your road and people get hurt. I mean, that's how weaselly we are. It's incredible.
It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And the weather is going to become even more erratic, so we better figure this out. Anyway, it's my turn next. So, for the majority of us, the Christmas season is a happy time. A time for family and friends and catching up with those dearest to us. It's a time for community and bad jumpers, just look at the show, and the odd bit of fun and slightly naughty behaviour at the office party, though probably not this year. However, for some, Christmas means the opposite of everything I have just mentioned and is instead a stark reminder that they are alone in this world, without family and someone to call their own. This year, the Jo Cox Foundation is asking that we remember all those who might not have anyone during the Christmas period and to make an effort of visiting our neighbours with a plate of mince pies. If we all use this Christmas to check in on those around us, not just those closest to us, perhaps the season to be jolly would be something felt by all. In the end, a little Christmas care is what really creates the Christmas cheer. So, So, with that in mind, as the Jo Cox Foundation is saying, will you all take a mince pie?
Thank you very much indeed, June.
June, you are spoiling us.
I trust these are
Thank you
homemade.
very much.
Homemade. I made them myself.
Why does it say that? Why does it say that brand on the back?
Yeah,
On the bottom of the tin?
a little Mr. Someone.
2 for me. Oh, we got
Who
that
ate
one.
all the mince pies, Carol?
Exactly.
But June, you're right. I mean, I think Christmas is a difficult time of year because I think there is so much sort of enforced jollity, and there's sort of also a bit of Christmas fascism where you're made to wear Christmas jerseys and really embarrassing turkey hats on air, and there's just there's no get out of jail free cards.
There isn't.
And then you also have this epidemic of loneliness. And, many more single households
For sure.
And actually, I think there is more awareness of people being on their own this Christmas. I saw a heart-rending ad on TV because everyone has their charities.
We've got that.
Oh, have we?
We've got that
God, I couldn't
this is
bear
heartbreaking.
it.
Hello, this is John. I'm not in at the moment, but you can leave a message for me. Please leave a message.
That really gets me. You look at someone like that who was totally alone in a big area. And I grew up in a mining village in the northeast, and it was a very small community, and everyone knew everyone who had problems. And I spent half of my childhood on icy days like this. My mum used to make Sunday dinners an extra ones, and other people did too. And I used to have to go and take them just because we knew the people who were isolated. We knew the people who had problems. And the problem for someone like this gentleman here is that nobody knows what he's going through. And just some figures before we move on. That's Age Concern. It's called Age UK. Made that advert. 1.2 lonely people in this country, but it's not just it's 1 million. Sorry, not just 1.2, of course. But it's not just damaging for your mental health. It's damaging for your physical health. Apparently, lonely people are. It's the equivalent of smoking 15 to 20 fags a day. It's the equivalent of being fat. It's your mortality rate jets up by 26%, and you're more likely to get dementia if you're lonely.
Well, I'm probably the only one on the pledge panel who saw that advert and decided to take action. So I thought,
no.
I did, yeah.
I
thought, who do I know who's lonely, vulnerable, elderly, infirm? So I gave Greg a call and he needed some milk. So there you go, mate. There's the milk you required.
That's what I could do with this.
But listen, before we move away...
I'll bring the soup tomorrow.
Before we move away, Age UK have a befriending scheme, and this is an amazing scheme. And what you do is you ring them up, and once a week they assign you to someone in your area. And once a week, you pay a visit for half an hour. You maybe take them to a cafe for a cup of coffee. It's a fantastic... I'm signing up.
I'm signing up. You're going to sign up?
Yeah,
we're in. Greg...
Am I going to sign up?
Yeah.
Oh, Scrooge is me.
I think I would sign up, but I think what is interesting is there must be a lot of people we don't know. That's the problem. I think most human beings, we go around and say, Happy Christmas, come and join. But we actually don't know these people. We don't know where they are.
Also because, it's like what the Jo Cox Foundation is saying, we don't talk to our neighbours anymore. So actually, you don't have to go that far. It might actually be somebody on your street.
That depends where you live. That depends on the different sorts of areas. I mean,
I think there's a lot
if you go
of
into rural areas, people talk to their neighbours in a way in the cities they don't.
Come on, you talk to your neighbours.
Well, I do.
I know we're outgoing.
No, but
people,
the only reason I talk to my neighbours is because most of my neighbours are my friends. We all got places in the same building.
And mine too. And
I bet you talk to you.
We social.
And I bet you say, I don't know about this buying. Now, what I do agree with...
the stats show you that.
Rachel Reeves, who, is a co-chair, she says that loneliness should be like one of the great social evils.
Yes.
Should be promoted to be the sixth... And I think it probably is. And as you say, the health figures, which you kind of...
And the cost.
Look at that moving ad.
The cost. If you look at the LSE have done a study on it, and it's the equivalent of £6,000 per person.
But the other interesting thing I found was that 40% of older people say that at Christmas that their main friend is television. Which is sad.
People. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Can I show you a clip? This is a clip from Kim Leadbeater, who is Jo Cox's sister, and she's made a message especially for us.
What Jo was working on was about people, and that's very representative of how we were brought up. We were brought up to care about other people and to care about those around us at a community level and on a personal level. You can make a difference, and that might just be about having a conversation with somebody in the street. It might be knocking on a neighbour's door, just reaching out within your society. We're so busy, we're dashing around on our phones and our laptops, and it's very... And I was guilty of it. You end up living in a bit of a bubble, and sometimes we need to burst that bubble and we need to reach out to those that are nearest to us.
Totally.
Right.
And those that are vulnerable.
And
you don't have to bake the mince pies yourself.
You know what else has died out? In my village, we had a working men's social club.
Okay. Yes.
And where drink was cheap. And lots of elderly people who'd lost someone, because I think half of the people over 75 live there, they would come to the club and they could have a drink for an hour or so. And it was fantastic because we used to ferry them back. If you knew somebody had to walk half a mile, somebody who was driving would ferry them back. I don't think that happens in cities. That sort of care just doesn't happen.
Weird. You might have in a situation here, there could be a youngish bloke or youngish woman in his or her home not talking to neighbours on either side, but on the internet, talking to people in Japan, talking to people in the US.
But it's still not the same.
No, and I'm saying, instead of actually face-to-face knocking on the door, hello, Mrs Buglugs, how are you feeling? Do you need some milk? As I did for Greg. Yeah, poor old chap. He was linked there by one bar. He had one bar on in the heater. It really was.
I have noticed that it's got a sell-by date.
Yes, that's right. Trying to kill you.
It's your old milk.
It's cheaper.
Yes, it's cheaper.
That's the way social media's gone.
And can I say, I mean, I don't know if you guys know, but I grew up on a council estate. Really? Yeah, I did. And when I was growing up, it was the same as what Carol described. We all knew our neighbours. We were a community, and we actually helped each other. So, you know, when my mum had to go out to work, it was my neighbours that looked after us as kids. And again, the elderly people who were alone, we would go over to their houses and keep them company.
But people organise Christmas lunches for the homeless, and, you know, lots of people go to centres and they get a real kick out of actually doing something that's, you know, positive and communitarian on Christmas Day. There surely must be a system whereby you can get the lonely together, or you know, have Christmas lunch. You know, and frankly, I wish they'd come and join us. It'd probably make our family lunch a bit less stressful.
Well, is it fun, man? Your place?
Well, you can imagine there are several banned topics.
The family lunch?
Let's do it the other way. What can you talk about?
Yes.
We can talk about the food. What we do is we say, this is delicious, lovely moist turkey. That's safe. That's about it.
Not if you wear that.
Delicious mince pies. Yes.
Well, we are going to be a little bit lonely for a bit because we're off to have a break. But coming up, find out who this lot would name as their Person of the Year. And if they don't say me, after what I've achieved, they're playing wrong. For Time magazine, it was the silence breakers who spoke out and lit the firestorm that is the scandal of inappropriate and unwanted sexual attention that's engulfed everywhere from Westminster to Hollywood. For FIFA, the international football body, it was Cristiano Ronaldo. And for The Spectator magazine, it was Conservative Queen of Scotland, Ruth Davidson. I speak, of course, of a Person of the Year award. And as we approach the Christmas pudding and brandy snaps end of the run of the pledge for this year, it seems only right that we, as with these other august organisations, pick a suitable winner. So to get the ball rolling, I'm going for... Actually, why don't we just let her speak for herself?
You're joking. Not another one? Oh, for God's sake, I can't stand this. There's too much politics going on at the moment. Why does she need to do it?
Brenda from Bristol, we support and we salute you, and you spoke for the nation. Oh, by the way, have I mentioned that for Press Gazette, the Journalist of the Year was Nick Ferrari? Just thought you'd like to know.
There have been quite a few shock elections and shock votes this year, and obviously
I love Brenda.
No, I'm saying you as...
Oh, that one I see.
Trump, Nick Ferrari.
Brexit, Trump and Nick Ferrari.
You know what? I think that Theresa May was saying the same thing after, wasn't she? Brenda had a point. Yeah, I agree. Brenda was amazing.
But who would your nomination be?
My nominee or nominees would be the survivors of Grenfell Tower.
OK.
You know, it's 6 months on, and it's just heartbreaking still. You just cannot imagine what those people had to go through, those that lost their lives and obviously those that have survived. And I think it's just a disgrace that more hasn't been done, that so many of them haven't been housed. And I think aside from that, what happened at Grenfell, I believe, is a turning point for our city and actually for our nation in terms of how we treat our poor.
Without, obviously, it was horrific, and this is injecting a serious note into what is a fairly festive programme. But, I mean, the people who are spending Christmas in hotel rooms, that's absolutely appalling for them. Everybody has had an offer.
Yeah.
Everybody has had an offer. Doesn't mean they have to accept it. And I had the leader of the council who did a phone-in with me yesterday, and she admits the council has lost the trust of these people because it is thought, if you take a temporary offer, because the leader said it is far better to have your own front door that you can go behind rather than going to the same hotel room. But their fear is if they take a lesser property, they then drop down to the bottom of this. And the council admit that is not true, and they've not done enough.
But when you've already lost so much, to be away from your community, to be far from your children's school, it's a lot. So I understand them, that's what I'm saying.
But practically, we had a lady on this morning on the radio show, and she was saying that, because I asked her if Grenfell should be demolished, because a lot of people are saying, who were in there, they look at it and it's psychologically disturbing and distressing for them. And she was saying, you know, they should knock it down and never build on there again. But, you know, we're going to have to build somewhere to accommodate these people.
And I think they should rebuild a state-of-the-art tower, precisely.
A memorial garden with a state-of-the-art tower
and a new home for those people.
But let's stay with the sort of more festive touch, and where I think we can applaud your idea, because Carol, you quite rightly have spoken about the lack of grit or whatever it was. You talk about literally about the lack of grit on the roads. These people who came through and these people who are building community organisations, they are showing real British... It doesn't actually... They're probably from Morocco or Ethiopia. They are showing what the British grit was.
And
so I think it's a damn...
all of the people who came to support them, and like you, Rachel, that were on the ground helping all of those victims, it just showed a real sort of unifying moment.
Damn fine nomination.
Actually, I was just going to say, Paul Ross, who I did the show, he was saying that because he went to help, and he took a Somalian family in for 5 days, I think, into his house. But he said they've been sending him cards and letters ever since to say thank you, which is a sweet thing to do. OK, my person of the year is Prince Philip.
Oh, now, I love Prince
he gave up this year after 70 years by Her Majesty's side. I love... You know, when I was a young journalist, and you'll remember this, you know, if he was on a job, you always got beside him because you knew he was going to do something outrageously bad and naughty and say something terrible. And I mean, I love his brusqueness and the fact he has no filter and he doesn't give a stuff about political correctness. He says it as it is. And here's just some of the examples of not giving a stuff. Let's have a look at this. Stop it.
Pay attention, because I'm now going to see the world's most experienced plaque unveiled.
Right, it will go in a garden, which complements it.
You can sound entirely native, aren't you? What have you done wrong in the exiles? Where do you come from? Philippines. Philippines, they're half empty. They're all here.
I've just got some really good ones here. Listen. He said to a Scottish driving instructor, how do you keep the natives off the booze long enough to pass the test? On Ethiopian art in 1996, it looks like something my daughter would bring back from school. To a woman in 1984, he was in Kenya, he said to this, he leaned over, he said, you are a woman, aren't you? Let me just say this last one. And at a Bangladeshi youth club in 2002, he walked in and went, so who's on drugs here?
He's a one-man walking antidote to political correctness.
I
applaud him. As I applaud you, by the way.
I want to hear Greg's stories and indeed yours, Rachel. I met him about 5-6 years ago at a journalist charity thing that came along. It's the first time I'd met him. And he put his hand in and said, what do you do? I said, well, sir, I present a radio programme. What's on the radio programme? I said, well, sir, we do stories about politicians who make cock-ups and footballers who are caught in disgrace in hotel rooms. And without missing a beat, and even then he was 94, so he said, well, you're never short of material then. Incredible!
Do you know, he was in the White House when he was at a dinner with Nixon. Now, this is just coming to here. He was at a dinner with Nixon, and people were going and filtering off. And a butler who was there came to serve him a drink. And he said to the butler, I will have one with you if you let me serve you. And apparently, him and the butler sat all night. Everyone went home, and him and the butler sat all night together having a chat. And also, he's coined a phrase called, I don't know if I'm going to get this right, it's called dontopiology, which means the science of opening your mouth and putting your foot in it.
Yeah, that's him.
Before I get your nomination, you must have met him a bunch of times.
I had lunch there once with him and the Queen. I remember saying, you know, he thinks he's got Alzheimer's. And he hadn't got Alzheimer's at all. He just forgets things. Well, we all forget things. I think he's great for the same reason. I think somebody who doesn't give a toss.
Yes, he really does.
Of what he says and who he... And he's extremely funny.
Yes, that's
what I like
the thing. He does it with, with wit
sort of
and humour.
It's people with independent spirit. It's Brenda in Bristol who bucked the trend. It's the Grenfell guys. It's Prince Philip. See if we can keep it going. Rachel, who's your nominee or nomination?
Well, it's another old bloke who I think has been a...
What, Boris?
Nick, you know he's considerably younger than you.
Not that much, that's really... Anyway,
no, but I mean, I'm with Carol on this because I've gone for a nonagenarian as well, who is Sir David Attenborough.
Oh, we love.
And I think he's just had like you, Nick, he's had a fantastic year. He has. He's got us all talking about things that are important.
Yeah.
In particular, plastics in the ocean and
Falling
the
in love with our planet.
fragility of the health and fragility of the ocean, which is a real... I mean, Sky's doing a wonderful thing on ocean rescue. Everyone's much more aware now of buying single-use plastic bottles. And... You know, Blue Planet is a fantastic export for the BBC, and, you know, we're making the best television in the world.
And also, it's brought families together, because actually it's family viewing.
Will never be the same.
It's like, for those, in fact, none of you will know what I'm talking about, but if you're of a generation, Sunday night was the Forsyte Saga, and this is exactly the same. It is incredible. It is an actually appointment to view television.
But this is educational.
Do you think, and I pick the word deliberately, has he turned the tide, I say that deliberately, about marine conservation? Do you think he's really achieved that?
Well, it's helped move in the right direction.
Goodness, I hope so. I mean, I think it's really good that, you know, we've got... Actually, Michael Gove seems to be listening to all these messages. You know, there are people, sort of neocon, rational optimists who sort of say, you know, no, the planet's actually getting more and more healthy all the time, which makes my blood boil. It's clear that the planet is actually in crisis. And it's not just pollution, it's also overpopulation and climate change, and we've all got to grip it.
Okay. I got to know him a bit when I was at the BBC, obviously.
Of course.
And the really... I once had a long discussion with him because I told him I didn't believe... If you've ever seen that shot where he's doing a piece to camera and behind the bear comes down and picks out a salmon, right? My argument was, you must have tied the salmon there. I mean, and he swore to... It's not true, it just happened. But, you know, how often does that happen?
But
he is a wonder. He also says, you know, because he was control of BBC Two at one time and could have gone on through the management system of the BBC. And I said to him, well, why didn't you carry on? And he said, because I wasn't very good at it.
Well, we've got to move on. So, very independent spirit there, independent spirit, but we're celebrating all these independent spirits. Greg, you have to keep that spirit going.
Well, last year, mine was Nigel Farage, who I had been incredibly successful, but I disliked and didn't like what he stood for. So I'm going to carry on that this year.
Another popular choice.
Kim Jong-un. And the reason I'm choosing Kim Jong-un, which isn't... I mean, yours are all easy, aren't they? You know, people that everybody loves. Nobody loves Kim Jong-un, could they? Nobody.
No, they don't. No.
But he's still there. Yeah. And he's actually stood up against Donald Trump. And if you have to choose between the two, and it's quite difficult, isn't it? But he stood up against Donald Trump.
Only because he murders his
relatives. Exactly. I was just going to say, anyone who does terrible...
Look, he does terrible things.
The brink of World War.
He kills his own family.
He does terrible things.
And his own people.
But he has survived, and what he has shown is Trump can say what he likes and do what he likes. He can't do anything about it. And I think that makes him quite my person of the year. Now, I can understand this might not be popular amongst the rest of them.
Did he just inch it over Mugabe then? Was it difficult for him?
No, Mugabe would have been many years ago, wouldn't he? He was on the way down. Kim Jong-un, he is there because he stood up against Trump, and Trump has discovered there is nothing he can do about it.
Well, he could do something about it, and if he got let loose, he would.
No, he couldn't do anything about it because he knows that if you take any action, unless they can get rid of him, shoot him or something, which I suspect is quite difficult, unless they can do that, actually, he can wipe out Seoul like that. And that's what they've discovered. And that's why I think he's my man of the year, my person of the
not
year.
sure I'm with you on that
I
one.
don't think we won't have a vote. Because it would be a little unfair. Because
Well,
how
I
could you
didn't-
choose between Philip and Grenfell?
But
I
you-
don't think you'd be... I think you'd be in the relegation
No,
zone.
but Grenfell, I can understand. The other rest of you went for soft options, didn't you? I mean, it was so easy. I mean, you know...
No, Brenda was inspired.
Prince Philip...
Brenda was inspired. In literally...
No, you were. Anyway, now you've not supported King John. Oh, it's time I moved on. You're watching a festive edition of The Pledge on Sky News. Up next, our predictions for 2018. As it's the last edition of The Pledge for this year, it's time for us to look ahead to 2018. Now, before I look into my crystal ball, I need to give you a health warning. I got the results of the last two general elections, the US presidential election and the referendum, all spectacularly wrong. And I was the chairman of the FA who predicted England would win the Euros in 2016. Instead, we got knocked out by Iceland. So, knowing that, let me get my crystal ball. Here's my crystal ball. It's good to see that Sky have lashed out, haven't they? They've obviously got rid of the goldfish and turned it into the crystal ball. I have my own
my God.
Mystic Greg. You see Mystic Greg? So here we are.
Mystic Greg.
Right, so what does my... Because I'm not going to be good at this. What does my crystal ball tell you for next year? Right, here it is. Well, I see Brenda from Bristol.
He used to run the BBC.
Yes,
What's
I
this
know.
bloke? Look at him now.
I know, look at this. Do you mind? I see Brenda from Bristol
Can you see?
looking upset again as we have another general election.
Yeah.
And Mrs May won't be Prime Minister after it.
I agree.
I see an old bloke with grey hair moving into number 10. No, it's not you, Nick. I think it'll be Jeremy Corbyn. But he won't have an overall majority, so he'll be there as the leader of an anti-hard Brexit alliance. I see tens of thousands of people protesting against the visit of President Trump out on the streets. I see England getting to the final 8 of the World Cup.
Oh, I don't know about that.
And I think our very own Michelle Dewberry will finally meet Mr. Right.
Lovely.
Well, I think
No, listen.
I don't know what happened to the goldfish. That's the really embarrassing thing. But I think I will take this off because, as you say, I used to do proper jobs.
Yeah. I felt strangely drawn towards you dressed like that.
You prefaced all of that by saying how hopeless all your other predictions have been.
Exactly.
And I think that one will be absolutely just as hopeless. The idea that Corbyn is going to get into Downing Street is ridiculous. Well, no, because even this week, after all the mess, there was a YouGov poll that said, the question was asked, who will make the best Prime Minister? 37% said Mrs May. Now, she's gone up 4 points, and only 28% said Corbyn. Corbyn, people do not trust with the economy. They just don't. I think it's madness. It's not going to happen. The election is not going to happen.
Have you got a crystal ball?
No.
I have.
Well,
I can see it.
Can I just say, that's what we put the Facebook questions in every week. That is not a crystal ball. It's a silly old bit of whatever.
It's a dead goldfish, I think.
I think you're wrong. And on the strength of that, because...
Right.
It's going to be hard to sell this particular one this week. But I think Mrs May, my prediction is that, don't laugh, despite a year of drowning in vitriol, of being humiliated and insulted on a daily basis, I think she will still be here this time next year. Oh. I think her position eventually will be strengthened. Now, this is hard to justify, not long after... what happened where, she was defeated in the Commons by 4 or 5 votes, I can't remember. Because, I mean, Churchill, Dominic Grieve was talking in the Commons. He had the audacity to quote Churchill, so I'm going to quote Churchill. He said, when you're going through hell, keep on going through it. And I think that's what... Keep on going. And I think that's what Mrs May does.
OK,
and,
June,
no, hang on, I'm just...
No, you can't go on forever about
it.
We know you don't agree. What's your prediction for next year, then?
Well,
I was doing my prediction for next year. I was doing it. Well, it didn't take so long. It took about 2 seconds.
June, how about you? What's your prediction for next year?
Well, I agree with one of your predictions. Actually, I agree with both of them. I think this government's definitely in trouble. I think you're right about people protesting in the streets for Trump. So a recent poll in terms of his state visit in January, 49% of Brits thought it was a good idea and 36% thought it was a bad idea. September, it'd gone up to 41%, and actually it'd gone down to 41% saying yes, and 45% saying no. And at the moment, it's gone down even further. 31% are saying yes, and 48% of British people think it's a bad idea.
100% of the panel have now lost their way.
But what I will say is I think Brexit actually might not happen. That's my prediction.
Oh, my God.
Because of this.
If I switch my vote to Remain, would you go as Mystic Greg every week? Because I loved you as Mystic Greg.
What, to get one vote?
I actually have quite a bit, and I'm just going to rattle through, because I thought a lot through this. Here we go. I have, and they're all in one sentence, 7. Number 1, England rise phoenix-like from the ashes and triumph in the ashes. Number 2, Jean-Claude Juncker becomes the surprise leader of UKIP. Number 3, Sir Vince Cable wins Strictly Come Dancing. Number 4, Donald Trump becomes the surprise leader of UKIP. Number 5, the entire country closes for the whole of February due to a slight snow shower in Motherwell. Number 6, Vladimir Putin now becomes the surprise leader of UKIP. And lastly, number 7, Rachel Johnson actually mentions something other than Brexit on the pledge. Now, I know only one will come through.
I'm going to prove you wrong immediately.
Come on, Rach, you can do it.
Right, Rachel, it's over to you.
Because you said if I wrote Remain, which means you think there could be a second referendum.
No. I've done some work about this, actually. And with my colleagues on the pledge, Rachel, take a look at this.
They need another $3 billion. So Brexit is shambolic. Brexit, a nightmare that's going to face us for the next 10 years. Brexit, the will of the people. Brexit is actually going to cost an enormous amount of money. Brexit.
Is my point made?
Oh, it's like a really bad rap, isn't it?
Rachel, can you say Brexit so that we can add to this?
Are you really going to manage Christmas lunch without discussing?
We are. Yeah, it's such a banned topic.
In the family home.
But my prediction is actually to do with Trump. Although, just returning to breakfast, one of my men of the year was going to be Dominic Grieve, because I think he'd make a fantastic Prime Minister.
I agree.
Good on him for what he did in restoring sovereignty to our Parliament.
The will of the people.
It's not betraying, Carol.
Not
you
for
know, and I know, that what you said doesn't make any sense.
It does make no sense.
Let's keep the mood festive. Let's
keep
it festive.
Yes.
But I think the Trump visit is going to be a success. Depending on how you define success, much is in the same way you have to, depends on the meaningful vote, how you define meaningful last week, which is, the MPs voting on Brexit. So a success, in my view, of the Trump visit would mean he comes because he is President of the United States. And it would be too much about him and his narcissism if he didn't come. I think it will unite the country, actually, in a weird way. Because everybody...
In terms of divisions over Brexit, because this is one thing we're united over.
I think people will understand that he has an extremely important job. We've got to honour that, and we will all feel the same, and it will in some way make us feel British again.
But isn't your fear that if he comes and he's very childish and very immature, and if he sees protests in the street, he's immature enough to get so cross and say, "You're not getting a deal now. Right. I'm off. I'm not going to deal with you."
You're not going to get a deal.
That's the moment for Christmas. You just said you're right. Carol Malone.
Yes,
the Christmas spirit.
What I said about Carol Malone, I agree with you. We're not going to get a deal anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. Anyway, but we interrupted you earlier, so
you did.
Give us your predictions for the next year.
My prediction was Mrs May, despite everything that she's had this year, all the vitriol, all the humiliation, I think the woman has the most amazing...
No, that can't be your prediction. You've told us that already.
That was my prediction.
Yeah,
well, you told us that.
Well, what are you doing to do another one?
Let's go.
I'll do a different one.
Let's go around the table. We know what you... Will Mrs May be here? Will we be talking about... We're all still alive. Will Mrs May be still Prime Minister in this time next year?
It's possible, but I do think that Jeremy Corbyn will be in number 10 at some point. I do.
I think she'll be Prime Minister.
This time next year? So I don't think anybody wants it yet, Greg. Do you?
Yeah.
Who would want it at the moment?
I don't think anybody wants it, but that's not what happens in politics, is it? Anyway, look, I've got a grab here of Mrs May. Okay. Let's just remember this year. Yes. These are the two bits of the two faces of Mrs May.
I'm not going to be calling a snap election. I've been very clear that I think we need that period of time, that stability, to be able to deal with the issues that the country is facing and have that election in 2020. I have just chaired a meeting of the Cabinet where we agreed that the government should call a general election.
I mean, that, you know, I personally don't think she'll survive. Whether the Conservatives survive might be a different matter, but I don't think she will survive as Prime Minister. But come on.
Just to add to the Trump visit, I think one thing a Trump visit will do is make the midterms even harder for him. When I think Americans see people in Britain protesting against him, that's not going to help him in the midterm election. So actually bring him over, because it could mean that, you know, we're on the road to impeachment. Alabama was an embarrassment.
But I think, weirdly, that the optics of Trump coming to the UK are far better than the optics of May rushing over and, you know, paying court to Trump in the White House as soon as he was elected. And remember that famous scene of him grabbing her hand as they came down the steps in the White House.
Yeah.
You know, and it showed Theresa May as supplicant, and I think him coming here...
No, to be fair, she didn't have any chance. He grabbed her hand.
He was scared, wasn't he?
No, what I'm saying is she, you know, she went over there like a rat up a drain pipe to see him. It was a bad mistake.
What I find interesting about Trump in this country is that it unites Brexiteers and Remainers.
That's what I was trying to say. I didn't want to say Brexit again.
Everybody thinks this man is a clown, from whatever political view they come from. So the argument is going to be, do you still have to respect him because he's the president of the United States?
We don't have to respect him, but we have to deal with him. We absolutely have to deal with him.
But I want Americans to see that British people think he's a clown, and I think that is going to hurt him in the midterm.
But he's still going to be there. June, he's still going to be there.
Doesn't matter. If the Democrats take one of the houses, he's in big trouble. That's when we're on the road to impeachment.
When he went to France, and they whipped him in and out on Bastille Day, so that everybody was out celebrating anyway. I think he won't be a big success here. I think Britain is there's a different sort of society, and I think the opposition and the hostility towards Trump is enormous.
They had a proper revolution in France. We've never really had one. They're much more, you know, we're a very civil society, and we believe in ceremonies.
But we don't forget.
Okay, now.
All right, you're going to come back to Mrs.
I can't have it for the third time. But what I think we do instead is, this is Christmas, it's time to put the hats back on. These two have swapped hats. I knew you wouldn't like the turkey. I'm going to put this...
Hold on, I've got to get my lights on.
Put the lights on.
Get the lights on, hats on.
The lights have gone out all over Europe.
Yes.
That's it.
Magnificent. Magnificent. Well, that's
to be a serious journalist.
Yes.
Journalist of the year.
You won't be journalist of next year, that's for sure.
Right.
Well, that's it for this episode and for Series 5 of The Pledge. We hope you've enjoyed watching. Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in the new year. Provocative. Straight talking. Fairness. Provocative. Straight talking.